Hello everyone, McGee here with another draft battle analysis video and recap, this time taking a look at my Week 7 match against Assault Wolf and the Bay Area Bisharps in the XPDLA. I was just handed my first loss of the season last week. I stand at 5-1, still atop the division, but working to clinch a playoff spot and work towards a first round bye. So I'm looking to try to get back on track against Assault Wolf here and make a couple of adjustments after my loss to ensure I don't derail my season. But all in all, still feeling very good about my team and my chances in this league overall. But before we get into the match, we're going to take a look at the options he had available to him and then the pieces I brought to best address it. So let me readjust this. Uh, we had a pretty interesting matchup. He has a lot of physical wall breakers, things I just can't fully wall out if he brings all of that firepower. Urshifu single strike, if it decides to go a band, will two hit KO or will reliably get a two hit KO on Skarmory. It's not guaranteed, but it's a very high success rate. So if he runs that, I just don't have a lot of switch ins. Spectrier actually has a pretty awful matchup. All I have to do is bring Muck in, and Spectrier just dies because I can easily knock off to get around disable shenanigans and then click pursuit until I kill it with the pursuit damage, or it flees and gets caught by the pursuit and insta dies. Really not worried about Spectrier. It really has an awful matchup overall between Blissey and Alolan Muck, so I'm just not too threatened by it. Araquanid, webs don't generally concern me. As I've shown in previous matches, I have an ability to get around the webs with some of my sweeping options like Diancie and Dracopult, so I'm not overly concerned about it for the web's sake. I'm not overly concerned about it for its offensive presence because it can't break Skarmory, so it doesn't threaten me too much as a Mon. Florges, not scared of it offensively, very concerned with how to break it defensively, just because it has it has a really insane special defense stats that it doesn't even require investment, which means it can be fully invested into defense and HP, and it's just a really scary wall to get through. And with options like aromatherapy, it can easily avoid toxic stall as well. So breaking it's not that easy. Bastiodon, so 1 point Mon, pretty much not worth considering other than carrying a couple of Earth powers, which his team asks me to do anyway, so I wasn't too worried or considering it in prep. Mega Aggron, very, very scary. Its ability to iron defense, body press, and break teams is very, very concerning to anyone. Just because my only answer to that really is Dracopult, which doesn't KO it easily, and so getting around some iron defense sets if he was going to run those, or just breaking its enormous bulk was going to be one of the biggest challenges in this match because Filter just gives it a lot of longevity. It can run rest sets. It has just a crazy defense spread, and so getting past it was always going to be a challenge. Dragonite, mostly only scary if it runs a mix set or a special set, just because a physical set's going to struggle to break Skarmory, and so I'm not too worried about a physical Dragonite. Buffalant, not too worried about it. Same problem where it doesn't really have a reliable way to break Skarmory. It has a terrible speed stat. Doesn't have that great of defensive stats, and so it just wasn't too concerning of a Mon. Victini, very horrifying Mon to deal with. Very, very difficult to pivot around V creates or any sort of physical stab options. And so getting rid of Victini in this match was always going to be very difficult, and a couple of misplays were just going to let it tear my team apart. Something I was very, very wary of in the prep phase. Venusaur, not too worried about it. You know, it has some potential as a leech seed Stallmon just because it can't really beat Skarmory, but it can just leech seed it a bunch and kind of force Skarmory out. It can cause trouble with Toxic on things like Rotom that might otherwise be able to check it. And so it was a slight concern to break, but it wasn't overly concerning. And then finally, Kragonal, not super scary. I'm wary of the fact it has Flash Cannon, but it doesn't naturally outspeed Mega Diancie, so it just kind of affects how I invest in my EVs on Diancie more than anything, just because I'm wary of the fact that if it goes like Specs or some kind of set that isn't Choice Scarf, you know, Mega Diancie is very vulnerable to Flash Cannon. So I didn't want to overly expose myself to Kragonal and give it a window to attack me. So it's going to impact how I'm forced to build my Diancie as a result. So those are the team. That's the team he had available to him. As you can see, my team on the left, same team I pretty much had all season. I made a couple changes early on to acquire for Alligator and Shaman, but otherwise it stayed the same. So all that considered, oops, I, we'll take a look at what I kind of brought to help address that. The obvious first piece is going to be Dragapult again. Haven't been able to get great success out of it most of this season, but I'm still determined to make it viable and work for me. I'm opting for a sub leftover set because I feel that if I don't want to be unprotected if Spectrier comes in, because if Spectrier decides to run a Scarf, then I'm very exposed. Dragon Darts because it's good coverage, just good stab, good stab all around. Sucker Punch in case I wasn't in an uncomfortable position, but Spectrier was decently chipped to the point that Sucker Punch could KO. Fire Blast specifically for Aggron to get some good damage on it, and then Substitute just to get behind a sub and kind of play around predicted switch outs. But the issue Dragapult obviously has is that it can't break Florges. Florges just hard walls it entirely. There wasn't ever much I could do about that. It's just one of those fairy types that Dragapult just doesn't have a reliable way to break. I've been running into a lot of those lately where Dragapult just doesn't have good answers to. Whether it be Comfey, whether it be Clefable, or whether it be Florges, there's just been these fairy types that Dragapult can't answer. But if I get rid of Florges, Dragapult actually has a pretty good time overall with that set. I run a Naive Nature just so that, or a Naughty Nature, I'm sorry, Naughty Nature just so that my special attack is more usable. Fire Blast can potentially 3-hit KO, maybe 2-hit KO, depending on rolls and the spread he puts on his Mega Aggron. So it has the potential to be more damaging than my opponent was maybe ready for, but getting it to be effective with Florges on the field was always going to be a challenge. So Mega Diancie, I'm opting for a calm mindset here just because I'm not going to outspeed Spectrier. It's not really worth going for a Rock Polish set just because its ability to Nasty Plot was going to be a concern or just hit hard immediately if it was a Scarf. I just didn't want to be too passive in setup, whereas Calm Mind lets me sit in front of a couple of things and click it safely because I'm not too concerned about them, including Spectrier. I can do it on a predicted Spectrier switch in if that was to be a thing. And then I get bulkier. Draining Kiss because it gives me a lot of health back on things like Dragonite, on things like Urshifu, which will one-hit KO very easily, and just gives me a little bit more of mobility in the game because I can heal myself a little bit. Power Gym is my most reliable stab option hitting hard. Oh yeah, Calm Mind was to help me get around Florges because once I start Calm Minding, I think after one or two, my Draining Kissing will get me more health back than Florges is taking away with Uninvested Moonblast. So it gave me the ability to set up in front of Florges. That was the value in the Draining Kiss set, in my opinion. Power Gem just overall good stab to spread around, hit things hard. Earth Power gave me a couple of things I could hit for decent damage. I believe there was Mega Aggron was the one set that mattered. I believe after a Calm Mind, I could reliably 2-hit KO Mega Aggron with Earth Power. So it took away his ability to switch in a lot of the time if I got predictive Earth Powers, or if it was below half health, then Earth Power would reliably KO it. Speed investments to outspeed, again, the thing I mentioned earlier, the max speed Cryogonal, just because it threatens to one-hit KO Diancie with Flash Cannon, and I don't want to be caught off guard there by underspeeding it when I didn't need to. So Diancie was kind of a very good cleaner once I got rid of a couple of things, or specifically his defenses. If Aggron was weak, then Mega Diancie just kind of takes control. Skarmory, as my physical wall, pretty much just there to try to withstand the pressure of Mega Aggron and Urshifu. Spikes to just get some hazard stacking because Mega Aggron is very vulnerable to spikes. Florges is vulnerable to spikes. Victini is vulnerable to spikes. Urshifu is vulnerable to spikes. His team's not very vulnerable to rocks, but the spike stacking has a lot of impact against him. Roost to get health back. Bravebird to go for predictive KOs against the Urshifu. And then Whirlwind, because if I expect things like Aggron to set up, or I expect things to switch in, a predictive Whirlwind with some spikes down just starts stacking damage on his team. So just a really, really good way to punish for pivots. Alola Muck, as mentioned earlier, he's kind of my hard answer to Spectrier. Spectrier just has no reliable way to break Muck, and I am vulnerable to the Will-O-Wisp set, but he's very, very vulnerable to pursuit, very vulnerable to knockoff. Poison Jab just there is a good coverage option to try to pressure out Florges. It can pretty reliably two-hit KO most Florges, and then the very strong poison chance will really ensure that Florges can't wish stall. And then finally Taunt, because the thing about Muck is he may get a KO on something like Spectrier or maybe even Victini, but he's very, very vulnerable to giving Mega Aggron a chance to come in and start clicking Iron Defense because Muck just doesn't have a way to deal with that. So we are running Taunt just to be able to ensure that Mega Aggron doesn't have that option available to it. So if it tries to tries to Iron Defense or tries to Stealth Rocks, Muck shuts that down, and then I can Fleet a Skarmory. If it decides to attack Muck right away, then I know at least it's not the Iron Defense stat, so it gives my Skarmory a better ability to wall that out. Just a good way to address that. I run a few EVs and speed just in case, for whatever reason, Aggron decided to try to speed creep Muck. I just wanted to be sure I was going to outspeed and not have any cause for concern. And I figured 8 was not too much to invest to just be cautious of that. For Alligator, really, really reliable sweeper. I was very prepared that if he was going to bring Araquanid and lead with Araquanid, I could safely Dragon Dance on turn 1, and then Rock Slide, as long as it's not a Charty Berry, will one-hit KO pretty much all Araquanids. And so then from there, Liquidation does 50% to pretty much everything else on the team, if not outright KOing it. At +1, Ice Punch will one-hit KO uninvested Dragonite, so Dragonite with the multi-scale still intact will not be safe from the Ice Punch. I opt with the speed investment not to. I could have outsped Timid Spectrier if I went Jolly. I opt against that. Instead, just go to outspeed Modest Spectrier because I don't see him having a reason to run Timid Spectrier. It doesn't get past Dragapult. Modest still outspeeds my Mega Diancie, so there seems no reason for him to want to run Timid. And so I'm going on that prediction that's the speed set he's going to be running at. And that way it gives me a little bit of extra firepower, especially after a Dragon Dance where Liquidation just starts destroying. If I can do up to 50% on Mega Aggron, then I can reliably 2-hit KO it. So I'm in a really scary spot to sweep. And then, Ice Punch does a couple of things, primarily Dragonite, but also Venusaur as well. And then Rock Slide really just for the Araquanid because I had no other way to deal with it. And I don't really need that move slot all that much, but that gives me a way to reliably one-hit KO it after a Dragon Dance. And then finally, Rotom Heat, opting for a leftover set again this week because I feel pretty confident I can prevent the Mega Aggron from putting rocks up. And I also don't think that's the best set for Mega Aggron, so I'm not too worried about that. And outside of Mega Aggron, he really doesn't have any good rock setters. So I think Bastiodon, but I'm not really expecting Bastiodon to show up, so I'm not going to invest heavily on that prediction. Substitute because I think I can force a couple of things to hard switch out and get behind a sub freely. Nasty Plot because I do lots of damage with that. Discharge and Overheat, just discharge my fish for more paralysis. Overheat because it's a very strong stab option. And then the speed investment is to outspeed Adamant Urshifu because, again, if he goes Adamant Urshifu as a wall breaker, especially to try to beat Skarmory, then at least Rotom Heat's in a position to outspeed that. And I don't have all of these slower things. Otherwise, heavily invested in HP so that he can tank a little bit of hits, be a solid check to Victini, especially the V Create sets, the physical sets. Otherwise, just trying to set up a Nasty Plot and do a lot of damage. So that's the team I brought. That's kind of what I was looking to address with my matchup. Those were the pieces that were concerning to me from Assault Wolf's team. And these were the pieces I thought would best pressure what he was going to bring. So looking at the match and team preview, more or less exactly what I expected. I thought Araquanid might come just because he might try to go for webs, but not that has been successful in the past just because it's a solid option. But he doesn't. He goes for Urshifu and Spectrier. Spectrier I was very happy to see because Spectrier has just no momentum to do anything so long as Muck is alive in this game. So as long as I keep Muck healthy, Spectrier is just going to be insta-killed by entering the field if I can get Muck in safely. Urshifu, I'm scared is going to be banned, and that could be a real breaker. Aggron, I'm concerned is going to be Iron Defense, and again, be a real breaker. Florges, I expected his wish support, so I'm just going to try to break that slowly. Dragonite, a good strong physical option. I have to be very, very wary of D-Dance. And then Victini, if it's a band set, V Create's very scary. There's lots of other sets Victini can run that's very scary. All in all, my opponent has a lot of offensive pressure, so I can't really rely on my defensive prowess in this game. Skarmory handles a couple of things okay, but if I just try to sit there on defense the whole time, it's going to go badly for me. I just can't withstand all of that pressure long term. So more or less, my goal is going to be to get some spikes down so that he can't pivot as freely, and then try to exert some offense on him so that he's not in a position to do anything. And so going into the lead, I I see that because there is no Araquanid, getting spikes up turn 1 is going to be my best bet. Skarmory leads really well here. Florges doesn't do anything to it. Aggron doesn't do anything to it on turn 1. Dragonite, as long as it's physical, doesn't do anything. If Victini or Spectrier come in, I can pivot to my checks for those, being Rotom Heat and Muck, respectively. So Skarmory feels like a solid lead. I see Urshifu out. I'm going to gamble that it's not going to go for Wicked Blow on turn 1, and I'm just going to try to set some spikes. He comes in with Spectrier. Again, what I've been saying, Spectrier can't do anything while Muck is in this game. It just has no room to do anything. So it subs here. I'm going to knock off freely because what else is it going to do? Maybe Will-O-Wisp me. And then I'm going to not click knockoff again. I'm going to click Pursuit because at this point, if he has a disable set, then that doesn't impact me. If he tries to flee, Pursuit OHKOs. So either way, Muck's in a really great spot to do damage here. It tries to withdraw. Muck clicks Pursuit. Spectrier is gone and out of this game. Again, it just had no options for Muck. Urshifu comes back in. I'm concerned that it's going to go for a close combat. I don't really have a great answer to close combat. I don't know what it's going to do. I'm just going to try to sit in and go for a poison jab. Muck's more or less done the thing I really wanted it to do in this match. I still have Feraligatr as a way to break Florges, so I'm not overly concerned if I lose Muck early because I still have a way of dealing with some of his defensive pieces outside of Muck. So I'm going to sit in. He's going to come in with Aggron again. My poison jab goes nowhere, unfortunately. I just didn't have a move for that Aggron coming in. But the thing with the Aggron that I'm always concerned about is I'm concerned it's going to go for an Iron Defense or Rocks. Either way, Muck's job is to click Taunt here, regardless of the outcome. So it taunts Aggron. Unfortunately, it's an Earthquake set, and it seems to be pretty heavily invested in attack because it gets the OHKO. But it gets rid of... it confirms that Aggron's pretty much more offensive than I expected. I'm guessing it's not an Iron Defense set because it didn't try to Iron Defense there. And so now I'm just stacking hazards while Aggron doesn't really have an answer to it. I expected it to switch out when it wasn't doing damage on a predictive roost for me, so I'm going to click Whirlwind here, which turns into a really great play because it forces Victini out. Urshifu comes back in. I'm going to predictively roost, expecting an attack this time just to scout out what it is. It's not the Bandit set. It looks to be a Scarf set, which is really, really big for Skarmory. I'm expecting it to switch out again. So Aggron comes in, takes more damage, so I get a predictive Whirlwind again. Florges comes in. Unfortunately, it's Boots, which is not ideal, but it's able to come in and kind of clear those hazards out. Victini comes in. It forces my Rotom in. It's a special Victini, which does catch me off guard. I really did expect a V-Create spam, but I guess with Skarmory having Blue Flare was just as effective of an option. And so he goes for that set. Psychic, which caught me by surprise. I thought it was going to be Scarf, so I was expecting a switch out there because it wasn't doing a lot of damage, so I predictively substitute. Unfortunately, that's wrong, and Victini gets pretty much a lot of free damage. I just have barely enough health to sub. I'm going to fish for a Discharge Paralysis here because it's my best play. Unfortunately, the Discharge is not going to generate that paralysis, and I'm going to have to sack Rotom here to create a new safe entry. I'm going to go for Dragon Darts here. I probably could have come in with Diancie and gone for either Power Gem or Earth Power. I probably could have come in with Diancie and gone for Earth Power because he had no switch-ins to that reliably. I think I was a little nervous about trying to bring Diancie in early and try to set up. I felt there were too many pieces left to deal with for Diancie to be effective, so I got concerned and didn't bring Diancie in. He pivots in with Florges. I know Florges doesn't have a good option other than Wish Protect. And so I know what he wishes. He's going to hard switch out because he's at full health and Skarmory's not going to do damage. So what I'm going to go for here is a predictive Whirlwind, expecting the switch out. And so that way I can ensure that the recipient of the wish is not someone that they intended it to be. It could be Aggron or Urshifu, but it won't be the one they specifically want it to be. And so I'm going to click Whirlwind again. I get Dragonite out, which is great. Dragonite gets no health back from that. So now I can go back to spike stacking. Aggron is a rest set, which is unfortunate, so it's able to get a little bit more of longevity. Wicked Blow comes in to do some damage. I expected it was going to stay in on that one just because I had predictively called what Urshifu was going to do several times. So the last few times he had U-turned or he had close combated and then switched out, I called all of those accurately. And so I feel like Urshifu was going to try to predictively go for an attack, expecting me to call a switch out. And so I went for the Brave Bird there. Very rewarded. Got rid of Urshifu with Skarmory, and now he doesn't really have a great breaker for Skarmory. This Dragonite ends up being a physical set, which is good for Skarmory. And now I'm able to safely um, roost. So on this last turn, I knew the safest option for me was to Whirlwind. Whatever Dragon I did, if he decided to Dragon Dance, if he decided to attack, as long as I lived the attack, doing Whirlwind was going to be the safest option because if I bring in either Florges or Aggron, I'm in a pretty good spot to roost, and I knew that. And so I wanted to just get this Dragonite off the field so that I could give myself a new option to heal. And so I get Mega Aggron back out, which is really great for Skarmory. Really free window for me to safely click Roost because Aggron doesn't have an answer to that. I've confirmed Aggron probably doesn't have, or he is not going to have Iron Defense because he doesn't have Body Press. So Skarmory is just in a really great spot to kind of wall out Mega Aggron. And then I'm just going for Spike Stacking again because he doesn't have a good answer to the spikes coming up like they are. I'm able to pretty much wall out the Heavy Slam PP. Dragonite's going to come back in. It doesn't really have a great answer to Skarmory. I'm going to get my safe Roosts back in. And then I'm just going to kind of keep pivoting around a little bit, forcing pieces out with the Whirlwinds. Florges comes in. So when Florges comes in, I know Florges isn't going to stay in. I know it's either going to click Wish or hard switch back to something else. And so, hold on, a little behind. Florges comes in. I know Florges is going to leave here, probably back to either Mega Aggron or Dragonite to try to exert offense. So I'm going to come in hard with Feraligatr and click Dragon Dance here because I'm in a pretty good spot to start cleaning up with Liquidation. Because I do 51% there, which means I'm always in 2-hit KO range. And so now I can pretty safely click it again. I get a critical hit here, kind of meaningful in the sense that I was in roll range of 2-hit KOing before. This just ensures I 2-hit KO now, saves me a little bit of health. And so now I'm able to Liquidation to get the KO and remove Aggron. As I mentioned earlier, Ice Punch on an uninvested Dragonite is going to one-hit KO after a Dragon Dance, and then Floor just doesn't have the density to survive that Liquidation with the Life Orb, the +1, the Adamant Nature, the Sheer Force ability. The Liquidation was just going to do too much to Florges. So Feraligatr had a really good end game option as soon as I was able to get some hazards down to prevent Mega Aggron from pivoting around freely. And more or less, I was just looking for an avenue to get it in. I wanted to get Urshifu off the field first because I was pretty sure Urshifu was a Scarf set, so I was going to need 2 Dragon Dances to outspeed it. And so I was just trying to make sure that was out of play because then at that point, Feraligatr had free reign to terrorize after a Dragon Dance. And so ultimately, that's how it wraps up. Dragapult still continues to be very limited in its usages. It got to get a KO this time. It got to attack twice, so good on Dragapult. Diancie doesn't hit the field because I didn't need it to hit the field, although Diancie's been a very strong mon for me all season. Skarmory continues to be very impressive as a physical wall. I do expect that its less than ideal special defense is going to be more and more exposed by mixed attackers as the season goes on and we get near playoffs because this win does confirm me for playoffs now. I have 2 matches left in this season. A win in either match will guarantee me a first round bye. So I'll be looking to try to finish out the season strong, get a round 1 break, and then get a chance to review my opponent for round 2 and get a proper counter built to them. But I do expect some of my strategies will be more readily exposed come playoffs, especially Skarmory as a physical wall. I do expect that's going to get punished more and more. But today he was able to do really great work, shut down Assault Wolf. It looks to be enough to bump him out of playoffs, so I may be able to avoid that rematch. My team wasn't well positioned to handle his overall. If he just brought a lot of offensive pressure, I wasn't able to handle that all too well. And so I was glad it was more of a mixed bag of options where it was not so leaning on the bans, not so leaning on the immediate damage. There was some setup required for a lot of his stuff that he was opting for, which gave me more room to kind of address it and then get pressure in the end game with the Skarmory and then finally the Feraligatr to wrap it up. So that's my week 7 match. My team now moves to 6-1. I hold the highest differential in the division, which is the first factor in determining playoff buys after record. So I'm in a really, really strong spot to claim the overall number 1 seed if I can just finish strong these last 2 games. But yeah, that's it. I'll be back next time with my week 8. Expect other videos that close out some of my other series that are going on. I do have some playoff matches to discuss, so I will be back with those.